presentation. That means we won't have any unexpected interruptions. Great. I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Great.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Piers. And sadly, yeah, we're all just too familiar with Zoom now over the last few years, aren't we? So thanks for inviting us to talk today. My name's Paul Orsley. I'm Director of Operations at the Silva Foundation. I've got a background in forestry. I managed a large estate in Oxfordshire for a long time. And despite my accent, all my career has been spent down in lowland forestry in southern England. We're also joined by George Dennison, who's going to be leading the live demo of myForest. George came to us 2.5 years ago as our graduate forester, having graduated with a distinction master's from the University of Bangor in forestry. So we're delighted to get George to join us, and he's now become the myForest manager just last year, leading the development of myForest. I'm just going to share my screen 1 second. Piers, can you confirm that you can see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, wonderful.
Fine.
Thank you very much. Right, so we're talking about myForest today, but I just thought you might not have heard of Silva Foundation, so I just thought a very, very small bit about who we are, and then I'm going to give you some context around myForest, what it is, and why we're doing it, and then George is going to lead the live demonstration. I'm going to keep my context part as short as possible so that you can get the interesting part of George's stuff. As Piers said, I'll be monitoring the chat as we go through So if you have any points, I can respond to them as George is demoing, and if you want us to re-go over something, then just ask as well, and I can get George to stop at appropriate points and get him to have a look at stuff. Silva Foundation, we're a small environmental charity. We work across GB, England, Scotland and Wales, and we're really trying to, we look at this sort of end-to-end process of forestry through from collection of evidence around our science work, the way that we interact and support people who own and manage woodlands through our innovation in myForest, through to supporting wood as a sustainable product. We're a small organisation. We only have 9 members of staff, but we sort of work in a way that's very collaborative. So we're not a membership organisation, which means we can interact very nicely with membership organisations like CWA or Small Woods, and our space is really in around innovation. So a few of the things we do to give you context before we get into myForest. We in our web tool and web development work, we worked with collaborated with a whole load of environmental NGOs a few years ago to create this thing called the Woodland Wildlife Toolkit. This is where you can put a marker on the map of your woodland, and it interrogates a database to show you what rare and declining species may be in and around your woodland, and then from that it suggests the management activities that those rare and declining species might like. So I liken this to taking a big book on woodland wildlife and then ripping out 13 pages because they're only relevant to your woodland and chucking the rest away, and then you got some really sort of good information on those species. It's a growing bit of software, so it has got software across Scotland, England and Wales, but has got data across Scotland, England and Wales, and we're growing that data all the time. We carry out something on our science work. We do a lot of social science, trying to get information and understanding about what's going on there from across the woodland and forestry sector. So we've been running something called the British Woodland Survey since 2012, and that's looking to survey people from everyone who's managing a community woodland to forest scientists about what they think is going on in the sector. We've done some very specific surveys around awareness and action regarding sort of environmental change, through to sort of more general surveys, but we've got a very good response rate of now, and a lot of the evidence that's coming out of that is now sort of helping to feed into sort of policy work. We work mainly virtually, but we do have a small site in South Oxfordshire where we run a wood school. So the wood school is focused mainly on furniture, supporting people developing furniture, and our focus is how to use homegrown timber in the furniture process. So making people think about the possibilities of not just going to the timber yard and selecting any old wood and what they can use. So the stools that you see here are a collaboration we did with the National Trust last year, taking ash from one of their woodlands in the Cotswolds, taking it through our wood school. The students that work at the wood school, that have run the courses, make these products, and then the National Trust sell them, and that creates a story, but also the students understand the process of using homegrown timber, and the money that's generated through the sales goes back into reducing their fees. So on myForest, we started myForest 12 years ago, very early on in the sort of when cloud technology was in its infancy, and certainly use in sort of a traditional industry like our traditional sector like forestry. We kind of innovated and pushed it out there when we weren't quite sure if it was going to land. It's our flagship project for Silva, and we take the forestry knowledge that me and George and my colleague Gabriel have, and we blend it with our web development team. So we've got an interesting balance. We have 3 web developers that work directly for us, and 3 foresters. And so we got, it's an unusual model for a small NGO. We have 3 web developers work directly for us. The reason we've done it is it's our way of supporting sustainable forest management. So many woodlands are not in active management, or people need a bit of support to around taking those woodlands into management. So this is our way of being able to achieve this through a small organization. We couldn't be out there providing individual support to everyone that needs it. So we provide that through myForest. And essentially myForest is a simplified or a focused geographical information system. So it combines a mapping system where you can map out your woodlands, compartments and subcompartments, and you can link that to a database. And you can start filling in the information about your woodland into that database linked to that geographical location. And what we've done beyond that makes it different to a normal GIS system is that we've linked in the requirements of the different forest authorities, so that your process to managing your woodland can be as smooth as possible. So, for example, in Scotland we've got we've embedded George will show you the management plan template, the felling permission template, and then from a woodland creation point of view, the woodland creation operation plan that is required by Scottish Forestry to get your woodland creation grant. All of this is underpinned by the UK Forestry Standard, so that's our go-to. We want to make sure that everybody's managing their woodlands and that they hopefully have got the UK Forestry Standard in mind when they do that. If you haven't read the UK Forestry Standard, it's I've probably got one of the last physical copies. It's all online now, but it's worthwhile. It's not something you will go from end to end reading, but there's some, it's everything's in there about the legal and good practice stuff that you would need to do to manage your woodland to a sustainable standard. As I said, we've been running myForest for 12 years now. We've got around 180,000 hectares mapped, which equates to about 8% of the privately owned woodland in Britain. I checked the stats this morning, and there's about 40,000 hectares of woodland mapped in Scotland. And our user base is one of our strengths and also one of our massive challenges. So our user base extends from someone who's recently just bought a new woodland, small woodland, very enthusiastic non-specialist, to community woodland groups like yourselves, right through to a forestry management specialist in a large estate. So the challenge that we've provided ourselves, given ourselves, is that someone who's just bought a new woodland, a non-specialist, wants something that's intuitive and provides a lot of support during the steps of moving through a process to creating a management plan, and someone who is a forest management specialist doesn't need that hand holding, but needs very good functionality. So we need to be able to straddle all that user range, and that's the challenge. And I think we are getting better at that, and we like support, we like feedback on where we could do better. You can set up your an account. There's two different types of accounts that we have. We call the first one Forest Owner, but essentially it's for someone who owns or manages a single property. So if your community woodland is one woodland, then that would be for you. Or a forest agent is for multiple properties. So someone that would be managing, I think Piers maybe in his previous role, or maybe still existing as a consultant managing multiple properties, might use an agent account where he has multiple properties all in the same container. So just to show you some context, some screenshots around what you're going to see from George before he gets into the detail. What we provide in myForest, this is what it looks like. This is a woodland site just outside Arbroath, where I'm from, and you're able to use a number of different mapping backdrops. Now that depends on, we run a freemium model in myForest. So because we're a charity and we want to reduce the barriers to access, we provide quite a lot of functionality for free, but we also want to make myForest sustainable in the long term. So we provide a paid for service which provides extra functionality on top of the free account. So George will show you some of the differences, but just taking you through how it looks. So this is an Ordnance Survey backdrop, and you can then add data layers on top of that. So very easily click on a data layer. This is the ancient woodland data layer that just immediately brings up all the ancient woodland in the area that you're on. You could switch to a Google satellite backdrop, and this is a Google satellite with a site of special scientific interest data layer, and of course switching between them when you're looking at your woodland and creating a management plan is often really useful, because you can see different things on different mapping backdrops. So within myForest, you use the way that the standard way in forestry of breaking up a woodland, so which is generally into creating compartments and subcompartments, and George will show you how that is done. But essentially, a compartment is something that is a big bit of woodland that might have a physical boundary that's not going to change, like the edge of a woodland or a river or a road. And then subcompartments are divisible bits in that help you break down the management of your woodland and put prescriptions on them. So myForest allows you to do that. And then within that, there's lots of mapping functionality that allow you to create other features. So there's in this example, I've mapped a historic feature, and then you can also buffer those historic features or other features. So and cut things out. There's lots of nitty-gritty functionality that we probably won't have time to show you today, but just making you aware that that's available. As I said, within each of the area or subcompartment, you can then start detailing information about what's in your woodland. So you can start putting information about the species and the species that are there, and with the stalking and other things that allows you to then move on to creating a management plan. We've embedded the management plan templates for our users in England for Forestry Commission, and for in Scotland for Scottish Forestry. If there's anyone from Wales here, we're still trying to work with Natural Resources Wales, but with not much success. But mainly here today, we're going to be looking at the Scottish Forestry template, but we also support the Scottish Forestry permission, felling permission application form as well. And all that information that I showed you from the previous screen then links with these templates, so you can store your data in one place and output them. From a woodland creation point of view, it's not going to be the focus of our talk today, because you're mainly looking at managing. myForest also supports a lot of woodland creation outputs, and so in particular here I mentioned the woodland creation operational plan and small creation operational plan that's required by Scottish Forestry to get your woodland grant scheme. Extra stuff that you can generate bespoke reports. So once you've mapped your woodland and added data, you can then start creating outputs like a work program, a species breakdown, age class breakdown, all sorts of stuff that's really useful when you're creating a management plan. Obviously, when you're one of the big things that you'll want from a system like this is generating maps. So it's all very well having the maps on the screen, but we can also generate maps that you can download and print or email and do whatever you need to. So it supports fairly flexible generation of a map. So in this case, a map with an Ordnance and Survey background. And myForest does all this stuff that you would need to do to make it compliant with the requirements of Scottish Forestry. So it's got a scale and a key and a North Star, and then you can add in other details to provide sort of grid reference points and anything that you would require as part of your management plan. One of the big leaps that we've made recently is the provision of guidance. I mentioned that's a pretty important part of what we do. So this is something that George has really led on in the last year. We found that being able to provide really small YouTube videos of 1 or 2 minutes on each section has been really helpful for letting people learn the tool themselves. So we've got a very good and growing suite of YouTube videos that you can access through our website that'll try and take you end to end through the process, and as I said, we'll be building on that over time. That is the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand over to George. As I said, please feel free to put any things that you want to ask in chat. I will be looking at that, so George doesn't have to, and I'll pull him back or let him sort of. If there's anything particular you want to talk about, just let me know. Thank you.
Brilliant. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to almost do it in reverse order to what Paul's just shown you. I'm going to start off on the home webpage and show you where you can find more information about the different account types, the account plans, and then the guidance, and then I'll jump into the actual tool. And it's not going to be a complete demo. There's lots of little bits that I might skip over. So in the meantime, if you've got any questions about especially things that you're looking at, how you can do more specifically, please feel free to ask Paul, because I can then tailor how much time I spend on different aspects of everything. So this is the myForest homepage. If you're looking for more information or need reminding on the 2 different account types, there's just a little bit of an overview there. So as Paul said, single sites versus multiple sites. Within that, there's the different account plans. So the cost of the different account plans based on the account type that you have there is available, and then a really complete overview of the different functionality offered within the two account types. As Paul said, we try to offer as much as possible for the free plan. There's a few other little bits that that come with the paid plan. I'll be showing you a paid plan just because it's my personal account, but be aware that there'll be different functionality based on that. Me and Paul have had a chat before this, so when Piers sends out the recording of this, we'll also include a discount code. So I think we've settled on 10%. So as Community Woodland Association members, you'll be able to get a 10% discount to the paid plan if you're after that. Also on the website, as Paul showed you, there's a growing guidance page. I think the slides are a little bit out of date from Paul just showing you the one section there to all of these different ones. So these are just kind of, you can click to open an expandable thing there. We've got a little bit of an overview, step-by-step guidance on how to go through each step of the process that you've clicked on, different videos and guidance there. If I go on to something like the data layers, some of the drop downs there have specific links as well, which can take you to external sources if you're wanting more detail. So if you were to log in, you can click on your icon here and then open the app. I've got the app open here and I've already come to a site that I've mapped. There's a lot more going on in the left-hand bar here, but we'll get to all of that. So as you can see, I've got a 2/3 of my screen is taken up with a live view map. So this is a live feed from Google Satellite Ordnance Survey, whichever mapping background you select. So you can zoom in either using your mouse or the zoom in and out buttons at the bottom, clicking, dragging and dropping. You can move around. I don't want to teach you all how to suck eggs. You probably know how this all works from Google Maps. To change the mapping background and to start looking at what we call data layers, in the top bar here, we've got a drop-down menu with all of the different mapping backgrounds that you can choose from. So we've got Google Satellite, OpenStreetMap, and then Ordnance Survey, and then looking at the data layers. So this has been, if you use myForest version 3, so the slightly older version, you may have noticed that this list is significantly bigger now. So if I zoom out a little bit to highlight some of them a bit more, data layers are information that's offered up by other organizations that we're able to map on top of layers that you add. So we've got GB wide ones, so heathland, important bird areas, I think that's RSPB data. Probably more interesting for Scotland than when we're presenting in Southern England is timber transport forum networks. So these are agreed routes, consultation routes. If you were to click on each of these data layers, maybe I have to hover, there we go, I had it. As you click and move through all of these data layers, pop-ups appear explaining what the data layer is. They can take you to external links, and you can see as I'm turning these layers on and off, they're appearing on my map. And yeah, there's the pop-up. We've also got things like the UK Soil Association peat map. So this is showing deep peat in areas across the UK. Looking at, I'm just going to turn this one off as well. We've also got a Scotland specific section. So this is again a huge list of different data layers offered up by organizations, things like ancient woodlands, special sites of scientific interest. So FGS is the Scottish Forestry Grant Scheme. So there's certain layers that are relevant to woodland creation, like the pine wood and deer fencing, but then other ones that are linked to management, like the grey squirrel control. I don't think I'm in that area, so I wouldn't get access to that. There's other things like special protection areas. So you can have a play with this, look at it over your site, and quite quickly you can gain a good view of your opportunities and constraints on your site before you even get into the detail of mapping. I'm just going to turn ancient woodlands off there. So because I've already kind of prepared this site, I've drawn a site boundary, compartments and subcompartments. So I'm going to get into drawing something. So if you're managing your woodland or creating a new woodland, you'll be drawing a site boundary. So this is the map that I've got here. Drawing polygons, line features and point features is all very similar. I won't spend time showing how to map specific features or compartments, but they're all very similar to draw. So I'm going to turn that layer off again, just to hide that for now. So I've drawn in my ancient woodland area here a compartment and then a subcompartment. So to add another compartment or to add a feature, I've got this plus button in the compartment section. So this would be to add a new compartment. If you're not used to the kind of forestry layout of compartments and subcompartments, compartments always come with a number. So you can give it just a number, and then subcompartments within that are always given a letter. So this just means when you're submitting documents to Scottish Forestry, it's in a format that they would expect. I've mapped a compartment here, so I'll ignore this one. So I've already drawn subcompartment 1A, but I'll show you quickly how to draw another subcompartment within that. So within a compartment, depending on the size of your site, you might have one subcompartment, you might have multiple subcompartments, just depending on the size of the site that you're managing. The first thing when we're creating a new subcompartment, I can show you the two other compartments I've got as examples, all based on creation, but we're going to focus on management today. So the subcompartment I'm going to label as management. I'm just going to call this example keyboard disconnected. Like compartments, you can either give it a name or a letter, one or both. I'm just going to call this example B. And you can see that within the compartment section on the left-hand side here, I've got this example added here. To access all of the data, all of the mapping within subcompartments and compartments, you've got the 3 dots for the row, and then I get a drop-down menu of different things that I can do with that individual subcompartment. So I can choose to add mapping, edit the data, or delete the subcompartment. So I'm going to go with adding the mapping. That's pulled up the site boundary for some reason. That's something for Paul to take note of. So because I've already drawn a compartment, subcompartment, and features within this, I can make use of this feature called snapping. So snapping is just to avoid gaps or overlaps with existing mapping that you've created. You can either choose to snap to corners, edges, or turn the snapping off. So it just means you're snapping to existing features, compartments, or subcompartments that you've mapped. There's also this sensitivity. So depending on how close my mouse gets to a corner or an edge, depending on which option I select, it means it will automatically pull towards that. So if I change that to 5 meters, it means I can get into really fiddly corners with lots of detail there. For speed, I'm just going to set this to 20 meters, and I'm going to fill this area that in my compartment that I've not filled so far. I am ignoring the OS mapping background there that says there's a difference between the forested area and meadow. I was looking at this site, so as Paul was saying, I can start mapping my subcompartment and realize that there's a little bit of a difference. So I might then choose to go to Google Satellite, which I can see that this ancient woodland seems to be really spacious. There's a lot of self-setting that's going on. So it just shows the power of being able to toggle between mapping backgrounds as you're actually working, and how that can aid you as you're going through everything. So I'm just mapping around my subcompartment using consecutive clicks. You'll notice that the starting point of my map was highlighted with this red circle. So to complete any polygon feature, all I have to do to finish mapping is click back in that red circle, and that will automatically get mapped. The area of that subcompartment is now added into the control bar here. So that's 2.28 hectares. If I wanted to edit the mapping, you can spend hours editing your mapping, making it absolutely perfect. So you can come in, you can see I've selected the edit mapping option. Every point that I clicked on is appearing as a square icon, and then at the halfway intersection between each of those corners, I'm getting the option to add a new corner. So if I was going to do it here, I can click on the plus icon, that would then turn to a square, and then I'm able to, well, the snapping's on, so it's done it for me there. But I can move that point to wherever I want. Just by clicking, dragging, and dropping, you can move existing vertices. And if you wanted to delete a vertex, you just have to right click. I'm just going to add that back to fill the gap there. You'll notice that within when I've selected this edit mapping as well, I've also got the perimeter. So if you're adding a deer fence or something like that, the perimeter is automatically calculated for you there. And if I was to move that, you can see that the perimeter, the area, automatically adjusts. So it means as you're actually doing your work and mapping, you might need to tweak things or want to tweak things. as you're doing that, it means that all of the figures are updated for you, so you don't have to worry about updating different copies of things. I'm just going to show you while I'm in here. You'll notice at the bottom here, I've also got this cutouts. So a cutout is just taking an area within a subcompartment, compartment or polygon feature out from the total. So this might be because you've got a pond or a badger set or something that you need to exclude from your management works. So if I was to click on the plus button here, I can cancel cut out any drawing, but then it's just a very similar way of just clicking consecutively around the area that I would like to cut out, clicking back in the red circle, and that area is removed. If I wanted to, I can edit that cutout again, and if I wanted to delete it, I can click the delete button there. The area is calculated as well, and that 0.1 hectares is subtracted from the overall subcompartment area. So if you're working out your stocking volumes, or in a creation aspect, you're working out the tree quantity that you need, that will automatically be adjusted based on the cutouts that you've got. I'm going to click save here, and that will close that. So I'm going to turn the site boundary off again. I don't know why that's showing. So you can see now I've got my compartment, which is the blue line, and then two subcompartments within that. As Paul mentioned, I've created an example just to show you later on, but going into the three dots again, I can edit general data. So this might be if there's any site access, if I want to change it from management to creation, any designations, soil, notes, or photos that I've got. But the magic starts to happen when I come into this edit management data. So this will start to look similar to the slide that Paul showed you. So I can come in here, I'm going to add two different species. I can add inventory, stocking, volumes, felling in a work program. The felling is really important for Scottish forestry, and we'll get onto that in a second. So I'm just going to add random percentage split here and different species. So you'll notice that as I'm going through the species list, there's a process of, or a series of drop downs that I'm going through. And this is just because, as Paul alluded to, the range of myForest users goes from no experience all the way to detailed agents that are managing 100+ sites using myForest. And when a user with little experience comes into myForest, that process of going through broadleaf, oak, and then common and Latin name, it just helps nudge them through the process. And there's a lot of cases of that within myForest that it might seem really obvious if you're experienced, but it's just nudging people with little to no experience through the process. I can add in diameter, breast height, tree form, yield class, and year planted. These all look self-set, so I'm just going to throw in random heights and diameters here. So we are looking at updating the inventory, but so I can save and close that. A lot of the stocking and volumes are very manual at the moment. We're working on how we can make all of this better and work for people in a smarter way. But at the moment, this is all quite manual. So I'm going to throw in 1,000 trees per hectare. You can see the basal area and the subcompartment basal area, well, per hectare and per subcompartment, is calculated based on the stocking volume and the DBH that I've put in there. And then I can also add the volumes here. So again, this is quite important for the Scottish Forestry felling permission. Again, I'm just going to make this up. Don't haul me over the coals for anything that I'm putting in. I'm going to move into the felling tab here. So because I've already created an example, it's already detected that I'd like to do it for Scottish Forestry. You can choose between Forestry Commission and Scottish Forestry, depending on what kind of where you're felling trees. So you'll see here that I can add a felling proposal and a restocking proposal. So there's lots of these little help icons as you move through myForest. So if I'm moving very quick through anything here, there's help as you go through it. So I can click add proposal, type of operation. I can go for a thinning on this one. I think that's different from what I've done already. I can then choose the species that I've got. So I think I said sessile oak. Marking of trees, you can add something there. Estimated area. So the estimated area is a little bit interesting just because of how you would calculate it. So there's help on that. It's not the amount of trees you're removing, it's the area over which you're removing trees. I can put in the age of those trees, the number of trees I'm looking to remove per hectare, or number of trees in total, so 200 trees, the estimated volume that I would expect from those trees, so 10, and then looking at the stocking density of stems per hectare thereafter. So again, I'm just going to throw in random numbers here. So we can just have a look at this when we get into the more detailed stuff. Thinning basal area per hectare, what did I say? It was 40, and then 30 after. You can also then add restocking proposals. So I imagine for most forestry interventions, you're going to want to be doing that. You can choose from the selector list. So all of the lists that you see, because we've worked with Scottish Forestry when developing all of these tools, it makes sure that any template that you would download from the Scottish Forestry website, when we get to the final PDF output, all of this will replicate and be an exact match of the template. So it doesn't mean that using the myForest system means you're using a different template than if you were to download something from Scottish Forestry. It's all the same. It's just that myForest enables you to do it all in one location. So I'm going to restock by natural regeneration, restock species. I'm just going to throw in something quickly. Percent of the site, 100%. Areas already worked out for me. Stems density per hectare, 500 per hectare. You can see the number of trees is already calculated there based on the area, and that includes the cutout, remember, and then alt restock. I'm just going to save that. I'm just going to show you this quickly, and then we'll make space for some questions. So the last tab in adding data is a work program. So the plan I'm creating is going to start in, oh, it's 23 now. Do this too often. That was just a immediate reaction. So you can start adding operations in here. So I'm going to be adding a thinning operation. So this is especially if you're working over a bigger site with several compartments and subcompartments. One of the benefits of being able to do everything in myForest and have all of this is that once I've created all of this across all of my subcompartments, I can then download a work program. And the same goes with the species that I've added. There's other downloads that are available for that, like an age class or a species class breakdown. But it just means that I can create all of the outputs that mean I can do my work in a much more efficient way. I'm going to be thinning this year. So I'm just going to click save there, save and close. That's a really quick overview of mapping compartments, subcompartments, and then adding data. Are there any questions at the moment, Paul? I can see 14 in my chat thing. So
no, there's no. We dealt with one question. So yeah, everything's good. Thank you, George. Unless anyone wants to pop up now and just ask George to repeat anything. Just to reiterate that you know, we're going. There's a lot of functionality in myForest, and we're taking you through the sort of main stuff. But so it might seem quite fast, but there's a lot of support in the background and the help videos, including we're online as well to support. So the question from Dorothy: can you import GPS data, and can you input mapmaker files?
Okay. So at the moment, importing GPS data, so if you're looking at latitude and longitude, isn't possible. We are looking at enabling that. But to show you the import mapping tool, so if you've used another mapping software, or you've been, let's say you've bought some land and you've been provided a shapefile, KML file, or GeoJSON, you can import that information directly into myForest. So this import tool is in the bottom left, in the tool section. So I can choose if I want to import my shapefile, KML, or GeoJSON as a compartment, subcompartment, or feature geometry. I don't have any files to hand. I didn't think that far ahead, but you can select the option, choose the file that you want, and then import that directly into myForest. And then that mapping will appear in the relevant section, whether that's compartments or features. But yeah, so grid references coming soon, or GPS data coming soon, and then importing KML GeoJSON at the bottom left there.
I'm not sure what type of file mapmaker generates, but I think it would be able to export in different formats. So as long as it can export to a shapefile or a GeoJSON, which I assume it would. Shapefile's fairly generic. Then you can then import into myForest, no problem at all.
Can I interrupt? The last time I used MapMaker, you needed a professional, you needed to pay for a version in order to export as shapefile.
Okay.
So if you were using the free version, you only had a limited range of options for exporting your polygons and lines. So you may be a bit restricted going from MapMaker to myForest, depending on what version of MapMaker you're using.
Thanks, Piers. Question from Jamie. George, is it possible to create specific trails overlay on the software? As our woodland is planned to have a mountain bike trail network created very soon. That sounds fun. So yeah, to show the feature function, George.
So when I've been talking about features as if you know exactly what they are already. So I've got the compartment section here, but then beneath that I've got features. So you can see I've already got a few features in here. These are all points and polygons. But if I click this add feature button here, I'll get a pop-up that lets me put in a name. So I'll call it a mountain bike trail, just because I want that in myForest now as well. And then I have the option of selecting between line, polygon, or point. So depending on the type of feature that you're drawing, you can choose between those. So I'm going to choose a line and then click this create feature button. So within my feature section now, I've got this mountain bike trail. And then like with mapping a compartment or subcompartment, I've got these 3 dots. So I can click on those 3 dots and then add mapping. So from that add mapping, again, I've got the snapping. I might turn that off. So I'm going to draw it through my compartment here. I'm going to actually first start in the corner here, turn my mapping off, and then move through my compartment here over the both. We can imagine that cutout's now just a big ramp or something, and we need space so people don't get hung up in trees. And then I'm going to right click to finish my line drawing in the corner here. So what I've done now is created that linear feature that goes through my woodland. You can do this with point, polygon, linear features, as well as subcompartments and compartments. I'm going to click on the 3 dots and then edit mapping. So you'll notice here I've got buffer color and buffer size. So I'm going to create a black buffer, but just if you're creating a trail or a track or a ride or a footpath through it, you might want to add a buffer to each side of your either side of your path. So I'm going to put in a 10-meter buffer. So you'll see that I've now created a 10-meter buffer that I can now add a cutout or clip to when I'm drawing my compartments and subcompartments. So that's just a really quick way of beginning to add opportunity constraints through your map and then adjust your subcompartments accordingly. So if I was to add a cutout in the subcompartments now, that area would then be removed. So I'd know that within my subcompartments, I've got a biking trail that goes through. They've got 10 meters to crash either side, but then that area is taken out of my woodland.
Thanks, George. So Emma had a similar question about tracks and woodlands, which we've answered, but could you also show how you switch off labels? So when you've got a woodland with lots of subcompartments and there'll be lots of labels, and if you can switch them off and on, that's quite helpful.
Yeah, so I'll show you all of the other stuff that I've done. So yeah, a load of labels in there. So to show or hide all of my compartments and subcompartments, there's the show hide all at the top, and then it would be the same with the features. If I then wanted to show or hide an individual compartment or subcompartment, if I click on the 3 dots, I've got show mapping. I'm going to have to do that for all of these. So if I show that, I've then got all of that, and then that would be the same for features as well. To show or hide labels, next to the eye icon, I've also got the labels. So that would work for all of them, or again, individual ones.
Great, thanks. Yeah, the woodland that I managed in down here had hundreds of subcompartments, and when you zoomed out and have the labels on, it looks mad. But yeah, that's quite a useful feature to be able to turn those off and on depending if you need them or not. You've answered all the questions, George. If you want to crack on, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I've drawn it. I'm just going to add one more feature quickly, and then we'll get into creating PDF maps. just so there's a bit more going on my woodland. I'm just going to add a point here and just call it badger set. So like with the mountain bike trail, add mapping, and then I'm just going to click to add a point in there. And I've got that there. So now I've got my compartment, 2 subcompartments, a mountain bike trail, and a badger set. So with any application that you'll be putting in, or if you're working with contractors or anyone's visiting your site, you're going to want to create a PDF map. So if I collapse these just to make it a bit more visible, I've got this maps section within the control bar here. So I've created a couple of crazy maps to show you the kind of detail that you can go into, but I'm just going to click this blue add map button. I can put in a name here. So I'm just going to call it CWA example and then create that map. That map now appears within the map section there. Clicking the 3 dots. So there's an edit map, download map, or delete map option. We're going to need to start with clicking this edit map. So it's a little bit confusing for new users. When I've done all my mapping, why do I need to then create a second map or do it all again? Or it feels like I'm doing it all again to then be able to download everything. So having done my mapping, now I can create multiple maps. I can create 100 maps if I wanted to, all using that same compartments, subcompartments, and features. So it means having mapped it once, I can now use those features at any point on as many different maps as I want. So I was telling Piers that I've got a site that I'm managing down here in South Oxford, and we're doing felling next week. So I've created 5 different maps for the contractor to be able to work on site at different scales, but it's all using that base mapping that I've created. So you'll notice that my live view mapping here has changed a little bit. So I've got this, well, the rectangle here, and then everything else is kind of grayed out. So because you're downloading a PDF map, everything within the rectangle is what will be visible on your map. So you'll notice that as I play around with all of this stuff, the rectangle might change shape, it might change size and orientation. So if I want to move that using the 4-headed arrow, I can just click, drag and drop that to the desired location. To move the overall map, you can still zoom in and out again as before. But yeah, to move your map extent, PDF map extent, you're using that. So I've got a different mapping, but well, let's choose Google. So you can change the mapping background using this bit here. You can change the map scale. So I might choose 1 to 5,000, which should just about capture everything within my compartment that I've drawn. I'm going to stick with an A4 paper size, but you can change that. You can also add, so depending on your printer settings, you might need to change the margin that's left on the edge of the PDF. For there, you can also change the orientation to portrait or landscape. You can change the title if you want as well. So now that I've set up my map, I'm going to go through the process of starting to add all of the compartments, subcompartments, and features that I've drawn. So to do that, we're going to be adding layers. So you can add multiple layers. Each of these layers is what will appear in your map legend when you download it as a PDF. So whatever title I give to each of these items that I've added, that's what will appear in my map legend. And these are the colors and the borders, the fill and the border that will appear as well. So to edit a layer, I'm going to click on the 3 dots and then edit this layer. So here I can change the layer title. So I might call this site boundary. I can choose the fill color. So I'm going to stick with a white, and then I'm going to change the opacity to see-through. So 0. And then I can change the line color as well. So I might choose for a site boundary line color black, and I might put the width as 3. Closing that, you can now see that I've got a site boundary with that's hollow with a black boundary. To add the mapping that I've already drawn, I can click on the 3 dots again and then select mapping. So this gives you a pop-up, and you'll see everything that I'd previously mapped is now available on this list. So my Blue Peter moment of having mapped my site boundary before, I can click to confirm that. Google Maps isn't a great background, but you can see that I've got this black boundary now going around the outside of my map here. I'm just going to do this process a couple of times just so you can see it, and it kind of it gets embedded a little bit. So again, I've created a new layer. I'm going to click the 3 dots to edit this layer. I'm going to call this one compartment. Actually, now I'm going to call this subcompartments. Subcompartments. Fill color, I might choose for a red. You'll notice that we've got some automatic suggestions here at the bottom that you can choose, or you can insert an RGB or hex code if you've got something really particular in mind. I might set the opacity to 2. I'm going to stick with a similar line color and a width of 2. Closing that, clicking on the 3 dots again, select mapping. So subcompartment. So I've got this management example. I'm going to select 1A and 1B and then confirm that. I'm going to change the mapping background. You can't see anything that I'm doing. I'm going to choose OS Zoom Stack. So it's quite a basic map. So now you can see everything that I've been doing. Do it one more time to add my mountain bike trail. So edit this layer. The fill color won't matter. So I'm just going to leave that as white and 0. And I'm going to have a pink mountain bike trail. Change that, and then again 3 dots, select mapping, and then here I've got my mountain bike trail. That's the buffer. So I can confirm that, and now I've got my trail that's going through the middle of my site there. So if at any point you want to delete mapping or change it, you can click on the 3 dots again, select. I might change that, so I might add the buffer as well, or change stuff around, or I can delete it to get rid of that. Just going to add that again quickly. So now that I've created all of this, I might want to change the order in which everything appears in my legend. So I might want to have my mountain bike trail on the top. I might want my site boundary at the bottom. So when it appears in my legend, it follows a better flow. I can then choose to add existing labels. So these are the labels that I've already created, or I can choose to add my own custom labels if I wanted. So there's the choice of adding a label and just you can see the arrow here to point to something directly, or I can also add an anchor. So an anchor is a really nice way of being able to point to something on your map, but making everything quite clear. So I might change the arrow of that anchor facing up so it fits nicely in that corner. I could call that access point. One thing that's quite common with all your Scottish Forestry applications is they'll want a site center grid reference. So if I add an anchor here for a new label, I can move that anchor to the middle. And then this is a bit of a myForest top tip that you're getting. So I can add the grid reference, add it here. So because I'm already typing in that, I can then hover over the anchor here. You'll notice in the top right, I've got the grid reference, latitude and longitude. So I can hover over that. So I've got the right grid reference and then type that in. So now I've got a grid reference, so I can move that around to make it neater. But I know that it's staying in the same point. So I've added 3 layers. I've added some labels there. I might want to look at data layers. So depending on the type of map you're producing, and so Scottish Forestry have specific requirements for some of their maps depending on the application type. So I know that one of them might be Ordnance Survey grids. So you can add the grid lines there. You might want to choose to add some other data layers in there as well. So it was Ancient Woodland, wasn't it? So I might want to choose to add grid lines and then my Ancient Woodland in there. I'm just going to close that. Well, depending on your use, you might also want to add some extra text. So you can add additional information in here, which then will appear on your map when you download it. Something that I'm going to cover quickly while we're in here. So the OS roads and OS outdoor data mapping backgrounds, you'll notice that when I've selected them, there's a download cost and a type of data that it's using. So this is our licensing agreement with Ordnance Survey. So we've worked really hard on this over the last year and a half to try and make it as cheap as possible, or as in the case of open data now, free to users. So any map that having paid for a premium subscription, so for an owner 24 quid a year, I can then download and print OS maps with using open data at no additional cost. So if you used myForest previously, because of our licensing agreement, there may have been a cost associated with that. So because we're an environmental charity, we try and keep costs as low as possible, but it also means that all of the charges that you might see in this download cost are us just passing over what we get charged by OS for providing that. So the two data types, so we've got open data, and then if I was to change this to 1 to 2000, it would become master map. So master map data is where you start to get charged. So you can use, well, the scale which open data is useful or is visible to is 3,501. So if I was to select the other scale here and then type in 3 to 5,000, I'll still have a download cost. But if I was to change that to 3,501, that's the border where OS data is. So that you'll notice that the map quality isn't the same because the difference between open and master map data is different. But if you're looking to get as close into a site as possible without having to pay for the master map data, then 3,501 is where you're heading. I'll leave that at 5,000 there. So having made my map, I'm going to now save and close. So within the mapping section, within the CWA example, clicking on the three dots here, and I have a download map, you'll get this pop up. And so this spinning wheel is just generating the map. The more detail you have on the map, the longer this may take. And so it just keeps. This is the point. Me and Paul always add this kind of padding in here while we're waiting for this wheel to spin. And we had it when we were doing a test and trial. It just wasn't loading. We were waiting there for ages. But here we are, download map. So that appears in my downloads. So now if I open that, you can see that I've got this PDF map with my map title, map scale, my legend with the layers that I added in the order that I added them, the data layers I added, the additional text, any of the copyrights that you might need to use, and your north arrow, and another scale bar at the bottom there. So if you were creating a map, as I said, Scottish Forestry has specific requirements for some maps depending on the application type that you're submitting to. We did have, I think they're outdated now because of the updating myForest, but we're working on creating guidance that gives you that kind of tick list of, if you're creating a map for XX grant or application, you need to do this, 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 and this on your map. Scottish Forest, I would say Scottish Forestry has really clear instructions on what you need on your map. So the OS grid 1 kilometre is something that you need on all your Scottish Forestry maps. So there's a tick list on the Scottish Forestry website that you can already access. But as you can see, you can create quite detailed maps with everything you would need while everything is still stored in myForest. And you can download that map as often as you wanted. Depending on if there's a cost or not, you might not want to download it as much as you want, but you have that possibility there. Mapping is probably the most complicated thing within myForest. So if there are any really specific questions about that, we can probably spend a little bit of time covering that. As I said, there's really detailed guidance on how to use the mapping tool within myForest. But if there's any questions now, then let's have a look.
Not at the moment, George.
Not at the moment. Getting better at doing these demos.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's covered everything.
Blinding everyone with your brilliance, George. So I think that's all right so far. Oh no, we got one. Piers, you've ruined it, Piers. Okay, can you use Bing Aerial? No, we can't, unfortunately. So our the mapping library that we use to create all the tools is Google, and understandably, Google and Microsoft aren't always best friends, and so they they wouldn't allow us to use Bing through the Google Maps Google Tools API. So I'm unfortunately not, and it's frustrating because there are certainly places like someone mentioned where some of them Google might have a good thing, and then in other places it might be Bing. So we have looked into the possibility of doing them both, but it's just not possible. Okay, right. If there's nothing else, then let's crack on, George.
Just because there's one thing that I will say quickly is, so on mapping backgrounds, all of these are live feeds from the provider. So if Ordnance Survey updated their mapping, so you can see that they did it here in the corner here, they've obviously updated their mapping, and I've tried quickly to do it, but my mapping's slightly off now. So that's just because Ordnance Survey have updated their mapping. They might have made it more accurate, or maybe I was just rushing on this site. But if OS update their information, then that will update automatically for all the users as well. So I've got, well, in the control bar here, you'll notice now that I've got two sections, creation and management. As Paul said, I'm not going to focus at all on creation. I'll show you some where to find everything quickly at the end, but we're going to focus on management. So within the downloads, there's a whole host of different things that you can download here. Most of these are only available to paid plan users because they're stuff that we develop by ourselves. But if we click on the plus button within the management section, you'll find this pop up, which should hopefully look familiar from Paul's slides. So we've got a Scottish Forestry template and then the Scottish Forestry felling application template here. So as I said, these are the direct templates that Scottish Forestry provide if you were to download it from their website. It's just that we try to make it in a more digestible sense so that when you download it as a PDF, it's the same template. You wouldn't tell the difference, but it just makes it easier for users as they're going through that process of developing a management plan. So I'm going to add a title and then add document. And then within the management section, I now have this example. So I've got a download plan, an archive plan, a delete plan, but if I click on the drop down there, I've got a whole host of components now to work through. So starting on the introduction, there's a lot of guidance text, links to different things that you might need. So yeah, there's a link to the UK Forestry Standard, which Paul told you about, conservancy offices. There's a good bedtime's worth of reading in there for you. Moving through each of the components, I'm not going to spend time filling all of this in. You can just go through it by yourselves and have a look. But all of your details, woodland description, I might add some things into woodland description. You can see there's a huge amount going on here. So maps might be the stuff that I've created there. So I've got example map, management history. I'm just going to throw in stuff here so that when we download it, you can see your text appearing. Again, there's lots of off-site links that take you away from myForest that might provide additional guidance. And yeah, this is the exact template. So you can save as you're going through. You'll get a little pop-up that reminds you, if you're someone like me who only saves at the end of everything and then wonders why you keep losing all your work. You can go through this. Different things, so like the management objectives, there's a few other drop-down menus as we're going through. There's buttons, interactive buttons within this, so we can add objectives, objective 1, and then we can add our different objectives there. You can choose to delete them or add them. You can add as many of these as you choose as you're going through it. Stakeholder engagement, again, a similar button there. Where dates and things are needed, there might be other drop downs as you go through that can speed up the process or aid you through it so there's no mistakes. Again, this is all the Scottish Forestry stuff within here, so you can add constraints, management strategy, management proposals, and then your thinning table. So if you remember, when I created the subcompartment 1B, when I went into the felling permission, I created a thinning proposal within that data. So now that I've got into the management template, I can see that I've got my example compartment, management example, and then my two subcompartments. So if I tick this subcompartment here, the data that I inputted there will automatically get added for me in here. So if I was to create multiple subcompartments across my site within multiple compartments or across several compartments, when I go through and create my management plan, I can add all of that information as I'm going, work on it in an iterative way. And then when I get to submitting my management plan, I can tick all the boxes and it will appear in here for me. So if I save and close that now, and then click on the 3 dots and download that plan, like with the PDF maps, I now have it downloaded in my downloads folder. I've got, this might look familiar as the template. So each of these pages now will pull all of the information that I've inputted and then develop it in a way that I can now send into Scottish Forestry. Here's all the gobbledygook that I put in there. And just to show you, when I get into the thinning at the bottom, I now have all of the information that I put in there. That's a nice little bug for you, Paul, under the area. That'll be because it's meters squared, not hectares. I can close that now. So just to show you the other aspect of management. So if I click on the plus and then a felling permission application. Oh, caps lock on, nice. So I've got my felling permission application and add document. I'm just going to close that to make it more obvious. So example 2 in here, again, a drop down, my introduction, the different sections. So again, another Blue Beta moment. 1A, I added felling information, so I can choose to add that. I might add it's always more difficult to type when you've got a bunch of people watching you. Save that. I can go through the different sections. So you can see here, I've also got the 1A selective thinning, oak. Did I click the wrong compartment? And then the restock that I put in there as well. Add all of that, so I can save and close, and then like before, download that plan, and that felling permission application form is now in there in the same template that Scottish Forestry would expect. And that's all based on information that I put into the subcompartment 1A when I did it. And yeah, all of that. So I'm just going to show you one last thing before I open this section up for questions. So I've got this empty archive section here. So you may have seen on the 3 dots there, I've got the option to archive a plan. So let's say as I'm going through iterations, or I've created my management plan, I'm 5 years through it and I do a review, but I want to keep the original copy. If I was to just come back into the management plan and change things and edit stuff, then I wouldn't have that original copy except going through my emails or all of that kind of stuff to try and find it. The point of myForest is to have all of your information and all of your plans in one place so that it's easy for you. You know that I don't have to scroll through emails. I don't have to go and find the old report that I've got in a paper copy somewhere underneath my desk. Everything should be here. So I'm just going to close that. So if I wanted to come and update this plan, but I want to keep a copy of my old template, I can click on the 3 dots and then archive that plan. I'll get the option to say whether it's been approved by Scottish Forestry or not. So if I know that this plan is something that I made, it was approved, I've gone through the process, but I just want to make a new plan now and update it, I can click yes, it was approved by Scottish Forestry. You can also add no, it just marks it differently in the archive. Click yes, and then add to archive. And now I've got an uneditable copy of that management plan within my archive. I can click on the 3 dots and download that plan or delete it whenever I want. But I know now that if I came back and edited this version, this would be the live version, but I've got that old copy for if I ever need it in the future. Are there any questions about management aspects?
Yeah, there's a couple I was just trying to reply to, but I'll maybe bring them up. So Tim's asked, we have an approved urban building management plan. Is this uploadable, or would we have to manually enter the content so we could use it as a management tool? Unfortunately, Tim, yeah, you would have to fill out all the information again. So there's no way of taking at the moment of taking a sort of existing Word document and uploading it into the templates on myForest. You obviously can decide whether you want to do that or not, but maybe the opportunity is the next time you review it, or you can start building up your maps in your inventory and then use it the next time that you want to create a management plan or review your management plan, rather than having to rewrite the same thing twice. I hope that's okay. Dorothy asked if she could import as a background layer a PDF with archaeological features. And I said that wasn't possible, but it would be possible to import a digital file. It has to be a digital geospatial file, so a JPEG. Unless I'm missing something, JPEGs are images that are very unlikely to have any geospatial element to it. So the geospatial parts that you need are then, like George showed before. So it's a shapefile or a KML or a GeoJSON. Those are the three main ones. So you can't upload JPEGs, unfortunately. Bob has asked, as part of the management part of myForest, is there a way that we could record natural accounting details to measure and monitor biodiversity? Bob, maybe you want to come on and just explain a bit more about what you mean, and I don't. There's nothing specific that we've developed here, other than there are places to keep notes that you could be used, but there's nothing. There's no specific natural accounting part of it. I don't know if you want to explain any further, Bob. No. All right. Okay. We'll keep moving on. Maybe Bob can come on later on. I'm just trying to think if there's anything, George, a way to record, measure and monitor biodiversity. I suppose the only place I'm thinking is in the management plans are places where you would talk about monitoring, I think. Might be wrong. Certainly in the subcompartment database is a place to add notes. So you could keep notes per subcompartment. So George, if you went up to the subcompartments.
Yeah, I can't see anything in here.
Yeah.
So if I was to come into 1A here, so I showed you with I can edit the data in a compartment, edit the data in subcompartments in that general data option, and then I can add photos and notes there. So you can add annual notes, so you can choose the year and then add notes there. Or you can add just general notes in there as well.
Okay, great. Piers, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on some of the wildlife data logging, and there are other platforms coming up for monitoring and recording natural capital or biodiversity.
Yes.
And I know Nature Scott have been working with an organization or a platform called SabBio or SabEO. I'll be meeting with them next week.
Right. We're working with an organisation, Liverpool John University, who've developed something called EcoServer, and there's lots of these things out at the moment. And I know that Nature Scott have got a consultation on developing an open access natural capital platform at some point in the next few years. So yeah, it's definitely something to watch. Michael has asked about importing information from the Woodland Wildlife Toolkit. Yeah, that's a really good point. We have developed the Wildlife Toolkit as part of our consortium. So otherwise, I think we would have embedded it in myForest. But we are looking at ways that in the future that certainly some of the outputs can be brought in so that you can store them in a single place as part of your management plan, or indeed perhaps make a call to the Woodland Wildlife Toolkit and get the report generated directly in myForest. So there's something that we will be looking at over the next year or so to try as more. It's one of those things. As more tools develop, things potentially could become quite a lot more complex. And they're all very useful, but there's multiple tools in different places. So we're looking at how we could access them and not necessarily have to develop the tools ourselves, but to access the information from different places.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's a really nice segue. So talking about new tools that we're developing within myForest. So I'll close the management section here, and I've got creation. So building on the creation work that we were doing with Scottish Forestry, we're in the process now of embedding a new tool for assessing whether individuals need to carry out an environmental impact assessment for woodland creation. So within the creation section here, we've got a plus button, and we've got the components area table, woodland creation operational plan, a small woodland creation operational plan. but we're looking, the kind of prerequisite to all of these is whether landowners need to carry out an EIA. If there's anyone that's in the midst or planning on doing any woodland creation projects that would like to get first-hand access or to look at this environmental impact assessment tool, decision support tool that we're making, please do get in touch. We're looking for testers. Testing will take place early Feb, sort of the 6th to the 17th of Feb. It's just a 1-hour session, but we're really keen to get landowners or different stakeholders from different organizations on board with that, because the information and feedback that you'll give us will go into making the tool better, and that will go into all of the creation stuff as well. Just quickly while I'm here, you'll see it's a very similar layout to the management. You can select components, area tables, operational plans and small operational plans. There's also a single download at the moment for woodland creation. If there's anyone interested in woodland creation, then as Paul said, we can work with peers to set up another session like this that focuses purely on the creation side of myForest. We might not have to dive into all of the compartments and features and maps again, but so it could be a shorter session. But if anyone's interested in creation, then we're more than happy to put something on for you guys, just so you can get to grips with that as well. But yeah, email me if you're interested in the EIA testing.
Great, thank you. Thanks, George. I just wanted to mention a couple of development things that we'll be working on over the next 6 to 9 months. So George showed you the map download that that you can generate through myForest. At the moment, that's a static map, which is really useful for adding to your management plans. But we're looking to, in the next 3 or 4 months, that they'll be made into what are called geospatial maps. So the PDF will have a geospatial element to it. So if you then used that map in an app on your phone, you can see all the subcompartments and compartments and features you've created as you walk around your forest. But you can also see where you are, so that you can start to make sure that you've got all your boundaries mapped correctly, or if you need to sort of tag anything whilst you're out on your walks, you can do that. So that's a really quite a big bit of work that we're going to be doing over the next few months. And then similarly, from an inventory point of view, George showed you the sort of way that you can collect species data at the moment. The inventory is all quite manual, but we're looking at how we take the data that you input and allow that to generate volume, so you don't have to go off and do sort of more complex mensuration work and generating that. So just a couple of things that we're going to be doing over the next few months. Bob has asked a question. I'm going to read it out. It's part of the management. Oh no, hold on. I'm further down, too far up. Geospatial maps, very useful. George's email address, right? Okay, so yeah, we've run to the end of the questions and to the end of George's presentation. Thank you very much, George. It was good. Is there anybody want to come forward with anything specific that they want to ask, or George can jump back on and show you something specific? Joe's put George's email address in the chat, so we'll be you can email him day and night if you're he'll only answer during the day though, if you've got any questions. Hugh has asked about emailing out the discount code. Yeah, we will provide some information to Piers and Joe after this webinar, and they can send it to everyone who's attended, so that you can get your discount code. So George will send that to Piers tomorrow, and then he can pass it out. Emma H, if you have time, looking at applying for woodland creation with the Forestry Commission. So Emma, I assume this is for woodland creation in England. Yes, we do. So we can talk to you specifically if you want, but there is woodland creation design plan stage 1 and 2 embedded in myForest. And we've also got a generic woodland creation plan. So we've done quite a lot of work with the Forestry Commission in England around creation. And again, if you want to speak to us specifically about that, if you want to email George, we can hop on a call with you at some point. Great. Okay, so Piers has asked a good question. If there's more than one manager for a woodland, is it easy to share the login details for a specific plan? George, do you want to share again and just show where we've got with the sharing options, and then talk about what we might be doing in the future to improve that?
Yeah, so you can't share, unless you all had the same email and password that you all knew, you wouldn't be able to share a Forest owner account. So I've got a Forest agent account, which allows me to have multiple clients. So in the top right here, I can click return to clients overview. So here I've got a list of all of the different clients that I've got. You can add as many clients as you want. So if I wanted to share that individual site with a specific client, I could come to this share button here. So at the moment, we only have the capability to share with one other individual. Agent to agent sharing, I think, isn't possible at the moment. So if you both had agent accounts, that wouldn't work. So we're really keen now to enable better sharing between people, especially organizations like Community Woodlands, where you might have multiple people that are all interested in the same plot. That's really important. So we're developing or beginning to work on a kind of higher level of sharing within myForest. So at the moment, you can only share with one other individual. So the way that Community Woodlands that I know of in South England that are working with at the moment, they have a info @ and then Community Woodland email. So they sign up to myForest with that email and just make sure that no one's logged on at the same time to render someone's hours of a day useless if someone else logged on and kicked them out or something. So it's a little bit more fiddly at the moment, but we are working on that because we realize the importance behind it. But hopefully that covers it.
Yeah, so that functionality was developed when we were working with the Argyll Small Woodland Co-op, and they were wanting to see if all the co-op members could be under one agent account, and then the member could still then access all the information, their information. So there's a way to share it. You can also sort of if that person no longer wanted to be part of the co-op, they can be released from that sharing, and they can take that property and go and do work on it, do it themselves. So there's reasonable functionality, but we're really working on that to make that better. Great. Okay, I think we're at the end. What's the time? It's nearly 5 o'clock. Seems like a good time to finish up. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you from all, Paul and George. It was a great session. Hopefully it's enabled people to feel a bit more confident about myForest and to get in there and explore some of the functionality in the videos. Yeah, Joe's popping up some comments at the moment. Yeah, good luck with myForest if you dive into it.
Yeah, if you do get really stuck, sorry, if you do get really stuck, please feel free to email me. Don't get overwhelmed and give up.
But I think that was a really useful session and really has opened my eyes again to how things have improved since I last went exploring in myForest. But yeah, thank you, Paul, George. That's great.
Great. Thanks very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.